they are available for private engagements and anniversary parties and whatever. There was a guy who only came to church about twice a year, which kind of bugged the pastor. So one day when he was there, when church ended, the pastor walked up to him and said, "Joe, I notice you're not here very often. You usually only show up twice a year when we have a potluck or something." He said, "Joe, I just got to tell you, as your spiritual guide, I need you to sign up for the Lord's army." And Joe looked at his pastor and said, "Oh, pastor, I'm already part of the Lord's army." And the pastor looked at him and said, "Well, then, Joe, why don't I see you very often?" And Joe looked the pastor right in the eye and said, "Because I'm part of the Secret Service." Well, today we're going to talk about secrets. And a subject I've termed family secrets. The secrets we're going to talk about affect families. They also affect churches. They can affect any organization you're a part of. But particularly today, we're going to pay attention to secrets kept in a family. I had a really great friend who was super active in the church. In fact, he was my finance chair at one point. And he kept a secret. And the secret that he kept was that he had a drinking problem. His job called for him to be out on the road a lot. Whenever he'd get out on the road, he'd start drinking, and he couldn't stop. It was a terrible thing that was affecting his marriage in a way in which his wife had gotten to the point she was ready to leave him. The children were small, and they were young, and they didn't really know what was going on, but they knew something bad was happening in the family. And it was just agony to watch my friend as he poured his energy into keeping that part of his life hidden from those of us, he thought, who would judge him negatively if we knew it, hidden from other people because he was worried about what they would think about him, hidden because he just couldn't face the truth about the problem that he had and what he needed to do and what he needed to change to deal with it. I invite you this morning to think about the secrets you're keeping. Are they helping you, or are they hurting you? Are they making you stronger, or are they breaking your heart? Are they encouraging and uplifting your family, or are they dividing and separating your family? I know the first thing that some of us are going to say is that, "Well, I really don't have any family secrets." Well, think about it real hard. Because virtually every family has them. There are things we don't want to talk about, things that we don't want to be revealed, and so often things that we just don't want to face. I hope that this morning, even though the subject is very, very hard, I hope that this morning you'll take it as an opportunity to at least be honest before God about what those secrets are in your life. The story in the Bible today is all about secrets, and though it starts off in a really humorous way. King David is coming near the end of his life. He's about to pass his throne on to one of his sons. There are two of them, Adonijah and Solomon, that are vying for that position of being the next king. And it says that David could not keep himself warm. Now, I don't know about how things are at your house, but there are two single items in our home that represent the center of power. The TV remote and the thermostat, right? Right? The thermostat. And particularly when my daughters get home, we are really, we regulate our temperature differently. And so that becomes okay, who changed the thermostat? Who turned it up? Who turned it down? And that goes on all the time, right? It says that David could no longer get warm. That seems like a little simple thing, a little simple sentence. But what it means is that David, who had power over an entire nation, who had led armies to war and walked away victorious, who had conquered lands and nations, now was succumbing to the reality of being a human being. He was no longer all power. He was powerful. He was no longer the master of his destiny. He was recognizing his vulnerability. He knew the end was coming. And so the palace does something really funny. It's really one of the most humorous parts of the Bible. The people that support David and advise him and care for him come up with a great plan. They say, we're going to go find the prettiest young girl in the entire nation, and we're going to bring her home and present her to David as a new wife. Because that'll warm the old guy up. That'll fire him up. And then the story, as you follow the story, she comes home, and even though she becomes a queen in his house, she doesn't function as a wife. She functions as a nurse. And this part of the story that's so funny, and you're supposed to get a tummy chuckle from that, laughing at what we do when we get older to maintain our lifestyle right. Guys all know we go out and buy a red sports car. Ladies, I'm not going to say what ladies do. I don't want to get in that much trouble this morning. We all do those kinds of things, though, right? I hear there's a product called Spanx. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to find out, right? There's things we do. And David has tried that, and it has just completely failed. And David comes face to face with his own mortality. Now, when you know that you're about to die, there's a couple different things you can do. You can run away and hide from it, or you can face it. And to David's credit, he decides to face it. And he wants to make things right in the world. He wants to right the wrongs that he's done. And for 40 years, 4 decades, he's kept all kinds of secrets. And he's kept most of them with his key guy, his number one guy, a guy named Joab. Joab has been his general. Joab is this amazing biblical character that is David's fix-it guy. Whenever David does something wrong, whenever he's in trouble, it's Joab that goes out and straightens it all and gets it right. When David wants another man's wife, it's Joab that makes that man disappear. When David is failing in his leadership, it's Joab that can walk into David and say, you better get out there and you better start leading or we're going down the tubes. When somebody challenges David's leadership, it's Joab that makes them disappear in the middle of the night and buries them out in the wilderness. The reason that Joab has that relationship with David is because they're kin. Joab is David's nephew. He's a great military leader. He's a great strategist. He's a great politician. But most importantly, he's close to the king because they're family. Joab goes out and wins David's biggest battles for him. When David wants a capital for his new nation, it's Joab that goes out and wins the greatest military victory in the history of Israel, the Battle of Mount Zion, which is Jerusalem. It's Joab that gives David Jerusalem. He goes out and wins more famous battles, and he has this incredible relationship with David. He knows where the bodies are buried. But Joab has another side. Joab, like a lot of people, wants power. He wants to be in control. He wants to have security in his position. And so when Joab has a political rival, he goes out and he gets rid of them. They end up disappearing in the middle of the night, only to be found later in a shallow grave in the desert. And David knows those things, but he knows he can't say anything. Because if he reveals Joab's secrets, then Joab will reveal his secrets. And the secrets of David and Joab drive this family. And they divide this family. So that there's this constant thing you're reading about. You just get worn out with it as you read this part of the Bible of this part of the family tries a coup and tries to overthrow the throne, and this side of the family goes and fights them, and these two sides get together and they go fight another part of the family, all trying to grab the throne of Israel. Divided as they are by David and Joab's secrets. So now David, who could no longer warm himself, is facing his death, finally makes the decision to reveal the truth to the world. The way he does that is very interesting. He has 2 sons that want to be king. He brings in Solomon. And everyone now knows that Solomon is the chosen one to take the throne. Adonijah is rejected. The younger brother, Solomon, will ascend and take David's place as the leader of Israel. And David brings Solomon in, and he sets his son down. And he says, there's some things you need to know. If you've ever been in a family that's driven and divided by secrets, you know how hard that moment can be. But you also know how important it is to finally reveal the truth and shine light in the darkness. And David talks to his son Solomon. He tells them the truth of how he reigned and how he led Israel. He talks about his failures and his weaknesses and his vulnerabilities. And he talks about how he protected a murderer in Joab, a man who killed innocent people, good people. And there's this cathartic moment for Solomon. Now, we all remember why Solomon's famous, right? It's because God gives him one wish. God says, you can have anything you want, Solomon. You think, you might ask for a nice Porsche, right? Their version of it, a nice gold chariot, right? He might ask for everlasting life to never die. But Solomon makes this amazing decision. He asks for wisdom. And he needs it right now at this moment with his father. As David tells Solomon what he's done, committing adultery, committing murder, breaking the 10 Commandments left and right, Solomon is confronted with a choice. He can continue to lead Israel as David did. Keep the secrets going. Keep the in-group and force an out-group within his own family. Or he can change and do things differently. And there's this amazing scene where his older brother, who'd been vying for the throne, now knows he's out. His older brother rushes into the tabernacle, which is their house of worship. And Adonijah goes to the altar, and you remember what the altar represents for them and for us. This is the hands of God. This is where we leave things for God. This is where we receive things for God. That's why your offering's here right now. We're giving that to the Lord. And Adonijah goes and he throws himself down before the altar. He's giving his life up. And Solomon enters the tabernacle. Now, all the rules of kingship in the Middle East in those days, and some would say now, were that when you became king, you got rid of your rivals. You made them disappear. And Solomon looks at Adonijah, and he has the ability to have him put to death, disappeared, another secret. But instead, he's committed to doing things differently. He walks over to his older brother and lifts him up and says, and hear these words carefully. Solomon says to his brother, let's be better men. Isn't that a powerful statement? Let's be better men than the ones who come before us. Let's do things in a different way. Let's be better people. And this morning, if you're bearing the burden of a family secret, I want you to know that there is life beyond that. There's a drinking problem in your family, there's life beyond that. If there's a gambling addiction in your family, there's life beyond that. If there's abuse in your family, there's life beyond that. And Solomon now can see clearly, and he lifts up his older brother and embraces him, says, let's be better people. Let's do this thing in a different way than it's been done before in our family. And then they sit down with their father, David. And David says, for 40 years I've been hiding a murderer. And they call out the palace guard. And Joab is chased into the tabernacle. And he goes to the altar. And the altars in those days, they had 4 horn-looking things that came up on each corner where the sacrifice would be tied down. And Joab grabs it and clings to it. And it's amazing. He doesn't protest what's about to happen. He doesn't say it's all wrong. He doesn't say this is unfair to me. There's almost a resignation in Joab that finally, this thing that's been hidden so long is out in the open. The head of the palace guard, the chief of police, the chief executioner of the kingdom, ends Joab's life there. And justice is finally given to those families who had suffered because of Joab's murders. It's a powerful tale. It's a hard tale. It's a tale that stirs the deepest part of the human soul to recognize and realize the power that secrets have in our lives. Edwin Freeman was a pioneer in the world of family counseling. He really invented the whole way of doing family counseling with families together. It's something I believe in, have committed a major portion of my life to being a part of. He was a rabbi and a teacher and a doctor and a therapist. And he says this wonderful thing about what secrets do in a family. He says family secrets act as the plaque in the arteries of communication. They cause stoppage in the general flow, not just in the point of their existence. It's a powerful statement from a religious leader who's also a doctor and a therapist. That you know how plaque doesn't just end our life, in the flow of blood in our life in one spot. It fills the vessels throughout our body, and it causes a kind of death throughout the entire body. He says that's what a secret does in a family. And he talks about the things that a secret does. And let me just mention a couple of those things for you. First, secrets in a family always divide the family. There is no exception to that. None. Secrets always divide a family. There are those who know and those who don't know. And that divides a family. It hurts a family. It causes energy to be spent on keeping and hiding that secret that could be spent on loving and caring for one another. Think about an experience I had with a beautiful young woman who was a part of our church, and several generations of her family were very active in the church. She came in and we were doing her premarital counseling with her fiance. We got to the point of that counseling when we planned the wedding. And I said, would you like your mother to be a part of this? Because usually young brides, they really like that. It's really important to them. And she said, no, I don't want my mother in the room. And I didn't know how to respond exactly. She said, my mother doesn't like me. My mother doesn't love me. My mother doesn't care about me at all. And I'd seen her mother. I knew her mother was so active in church and a friendly person. And I had trouble with that. We talked about it, and finally we decided we would get her mother in. They could talk about their relationship. And they came and they started to talk. And finally her mother broke down and said to her daughter, I never wanted you to know this, but for years your father has had a raging anger in him. And sometimes he hits me. And I have tried to hide that from you because I never wanted you to know that about your father. And that had divided their family, divided their relationship. And the daughter had experienced not her mother's protection, but her mother's distance because of that secret. We went through a long process with the two of them talking about that. Finally, they asked the father to come in. I know it was one of the most horrible experiences of his life. But after weeks of counseling, months, and even at the 1 year mark, as they came in and as a family, we talked about what they were going through. The father was able to say, I have released my anger. And I've invited my family to hold me accountable for what I've done. And it seems unbelievable to say this, but this has been the best year of my life. Take away the secret, and you remove what divides the family. Secondly, Friedman said that secrets distort our perception of the way things are. Just like that daughter thought that her mother was cool and distant. Secrets distort our perception of what's going on because so much work is being maintained, so much energy is being spent to keep the secret alive. to keep it going, to keep it working. They change how we look at things, how we think about things in the family. People know there's something wrong, but they don't know quite what it is. Like that young daughter thinking, my mother doesn't love me. When that mother was thinking, I love my daughter so much, I've got to protect her from this. You can't really see and know and understand what the other people in your family are like when they're hidden by the mask of a secret. Take that away, and we start to see people as we really are. Which brings me to the last thing that Friedman said. When secrets are revealed, despite the fact that family members might at first be upset, the anxiety level of the family generally decreases. It's amazing. Like that father who was abusive, when that finally came out in the open, he himself was able to say, this is the best year of my life. There's a transformation that takes place. There's a healing that comes. We begin to recognize our need before God and invite God to bring that healing, and healing will come. You can get better. It can change. And you can be healed. And your family can be healed. Like Solomon standing at the altar of the tabernacle, looking at his brother and saying, we can be better. One Sunday I was preaching. At the end of the service, I gave the altar call, and my friend Mike came to the altar, who had been hiding his drinking problem, hiding the truth about his life. And usually the way that works is when someone comes to the altar, they say something to the pastor, and the pastor, because we have the mic on, then we'll say to the congregation what's going on. This person's here for prayer, to join the church, to be baptized, etc. But my friend Mike came up, and when the hymn ended, he kind of pushed me aside, and he said, Pastor, I've got this one. And he looked out at the congregation, the people he worked with, worshiped with, prayed with, studied with, ministered with every week. And he said, I want you to know, I have a drinking problem. And I need your help. Because it's destroying my marriage and destroying my relationship with my children. And it's destroying my life. I can no longer keep that secret. And I can no longer hide it and let it have power over me. And for the first time, I saw something in my friend Mike that I had not seen before. Joy. This is the word of God in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Today we invite you to come. In the same way, make the confession wherever you are in your life that